Hello, I'm Dr. Sri Banerjee, physician, epidemiologist, public health practitioner. And in this video, what I'm going to go over is instead of talking about a specific programming language, I want to start here talking about some of the basics that are needed to understand how to proficiently code. So what I'll do in the next couple of minutes is provide you with some guidelines which would help you then not only generate new code, but also see kind of how all of the interfaces work when you're using them together. So let's get started here. So just some basic principles of coding. The first principle I would say is that just knowing that your computer really can't do anything on its own. So you have to give it instructions. It's kind of like a recipe that you have. And at a later time, you're able to, once you execute that recipe, then you can have whatever you create. So that's kind of how coding works. Typically, when you're thinking about telling your computer to do something, when it's visual, these languages are easier to follow. So say, for instance, Microsoft Word, you can just open up the program and then start in a visual way, moving pictures around and, of course, typing words. But text-based languages are a little different because what is happening is when you generate the command and when you put in the code, then the output is not instantaneous. So you have to kind of compile or run the code, and then once you do so, you kind of see the output. So one such typesetting software that I've used in the past is Overleaf, and LaTeX is a interesting word processing text-based programming language document editor. So these are just examples, but just knowing that at a basic level, when you're thinking about programming or the programming that I will be talking about here is mainly pertaining to text-based language. So just thinking about the basics of coding, this is very important. Thinking logically. So it's not enough to just know all of the steps, but also going at it in a systematic manner. And then paying attention to detail. So one thing that I often say about coding is that if you have one semicolon missing or one forward slash, then it can make pages and pages of code compile inaccurately. So your output would show a lot of errors if this were the case. So this is where bugs come in. So bugs are basically errors within the code. It might sound like it's insects, but the same terminology is used to describe errors. So once you are familiar with these, just get coding. It's no use trying to just talk about theory because coding is a very hands-on, practical sort of experience. So the sooner you just start making mistakes, the sooner you'll learn. So now I want to focus on one coding language. I did say at the beginning that we weren't going to really talk about any particular language. So we've created kind of a foundation. Now we can talk about some Python resources. So for starters, Python is rich with tools and pre-programmed code, all of which you can find within the standard library. And then typically you think of Python as having batteries included. What does that mean? Well, the philosophy is you don't need to install any sort of separate packages. You don't need to be thinking about separate code to be installing packages. It's all kind of combined in simplified code. Now, this was a kind of a big deal initially, and the principle that's followed does follow this kind of batteries included idea. But this is something that is that other programming languages have tried to adopt. And then, of course, Python is portable, which means that not only are you able to see it within your own computer, but you can look at it on a personal handheld device, a phone, whatever it is. So what comes with Python programming package? Well, it's something called IDLE, so Integrated Development Environment. So it's a free app and editor, allows you to experiment and write and edit Python code. And it's really easy to read and write with in IDLE and just make use of Python code overall. So you have a shell where there's temporary snippets where if you run the snippets and experiment, you can't really save that. So that's the disadvantage of the shell. But the editor, once you make those edits and if you experiment like in a soapbox in the shell, then in the editor you can go in and create a formalized edit. So idle automatically, this is something that is really neat, and you can see this in the picture here, is that different sections of the code are color coded and provided different sorts of highlighting so that, well, color coding is the main thing. There's no highlighting, but it highlights different types of information when you color code. So differentiating between what is your notation, which is very, by the way, very, very crucial. That's something that you should add into every code is notation. So it's important to differentiate between notation versus software that is being loaded or imported, as is oftentimes done in Python, and then differentiating that from the body of the actual code. So these are ways that you can differentiate between different sections. So this is kind of the foundation of a hello world, very basic sort of coding format. So these are functions that you can, at the very foundation, start coding and accomplishing. So again, this is a coding language which you can use right out of the box. Batteries are already included. No need to get any separate batteries, and you can just start applying these principles that I've shared with you, and then start coding. And this will hone your skills. The more you hone your skills, the more you can become a proficient data analyst, and somebody who can really deal with big data and enter this industry. Thank you for listening.